And hello, it is Kathy Frey here from IMCO, from the International Integrative Maternity Healthcare Organisation. And welcome along to this week's webinar, this week's Maternity Health Natural webinar discussions. And this week, we are thrilled to have live from India, it's 2:30 in the morning in India, Dr. Gauri Lowe. So Gauri, have a good wave, say hello.
Hi, thank you for having me, Kathy.
We are stoked to have you here, that's for sure. Just a little bit of housekeeping with those of you that are live online. Do remember that it would be great to hear from you if you type into the chat section and let us know whereabouts you are in the world and your role as a health professional. That would be great. Oh, just excuse me, my eye is watering. Oh. Otherwise, I'm going to be crying in front of you all, and I'm not really crying. Not sure what's going on. Okay, and then also down the bottom is the Q&A section, and if you have any questions for Gauri, that's the place to put them in, and we'll absolutely make sure that we go through those questions before we finish up today. But for those of you who are watching this particularly at a later time, I want to give you a good little overview about Gauri, Dr. Gauri Lowe, and she's a trained medical doctor, although since her home birth, in her third year in medical school, she has focused on sacred and physiological births and postpartum care. Oh, excuse my eye. She also furthered her studies in botanical medicine, Ayurveda, and several other holistic ways of caring for women. And Gauri's family and she has spent many of the last several years between India and South Africa, and where she has recently left her private practice to stay in India again. So Gauri's passion is supporting women to have empowering and sacred genital births with a proud, a sound, I should say, postpartum recovery and care. Gauri offers women's circles, she has holistic consultations and online courses, and she loves using elemental herbalism based on the intelligence and wisdom of nature. So women's bodies can heal and thrive as intended by nature, absolutely. So what we're going to be talking about today particularly is the importance of reframing women's health care. And I think that anybody watching these webinars is already a convert to that idea. But, you know, taking it from the idea and turning it into something practical and enhancing that movement is, you know, such a big topic in itself. So what we're going to do is I'm going to basically hand over to Gauri, and she's going to, you know, talk you through the next half an hour or so, and then we will do some Q&As at the end. And yeah, so welcome Gauri, and start with telling us a little bit more about who you are and where you are at the moment, and yeah, we hand over to you.
Thanks, Kathy, and thanks for the opportunity. I'm in West Bengal. I'm from South Africa, and as the introduction went, I never really studied medicine in a normal way, even though I did study normal medicine, I can say like that. But I was always more interested in the holistic side. So when I was studying medicine, there was always this kind of dichotomy and doubt in that process. But I did complete it. And in third year, I felt very impelled. It just seemed a natural thing to have my baby at home. And so, what I didn't expect was how it would transform my life. So it was actually like a year ago, 16 years ago. Last week, my son turned 16. And his birth really just changed my whole platform of understanding birth, and it caught me. So in his birth, it was a fantastic home birth with my midwife, who became my mentor and my friend and my guide, and I basically did shadow with her later. But what rocked my world at the birth really was the transformation of really getting the connection with Mother Earth and the power of that in birth. And when I felt so empowered and connected and supported, like a portal, like really like a portal, like it connected with her raw power, I realized that this is what every single woman deserves. I know that sometimes you can't have the birth that you might want. Sorry, my computer went out, so I'm just dependent on that lighting here. And it's not really about that outcome. It's really about having the opportunity to have that a woman can have the birth that she needs to access that power. And when I went back to medical school, I had a year off, then I went back into the clinical years after my son was born, and I saw what was happening, and I was seeing I mean, South Africa and India are a little bit similar like that in terms of the logistics around the maternity obstetric units and basically the abuse and the trauma and the way women are spoken to and the protocols that are followed and not followed and all of these things. So that completely tugged at my heart and my intellect, and I started becoming quite an activist for maternity rights, so rights of women during their maternity, pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. And I would write letters, I would get, sign petitions, I would hand in lists of names of nurses who I'd seen hang babies upside down and called 16-year-old terrible things and told moms that they had almost killed their baby and all these things. So I would make lists of this, and I'd go and have meetings with obstetricians, and they would have meetings with me, but nothing came of it really. So I think my focus and my attention also went into where it could be more productive. And I'm reading that some people are coming from the Peri and Prenatal Association, and that association really helped me, because the more I would look into this understanding of what I was feeling, what I was seeing, what my midwife was teaching, and what I knew to be so right, and then the knowledge from the Prenatal Association and this body of integrating it into a very, into more, we want to say maybe academic field, was really, really helped me. And so this kind of built on my understanding as I went, but in medical school, you have to get your logbook signed, and you have, I was also a doctor, so I had some taste and some attraction to learning procedures and being in the hospital and going through that process. So yeah, so internship was really, 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 really hard. It was hard in the sense of holding the dichotomy and having to act in a certain way, because this is what I was doing and was expected. And I had the worst obstetrician. He had everything extremely organized in the hospital, so it ran very well, I must say that. But in terms of the finesses of understanding what's happening for a woman and birth, and even for us, as interns, he was extremely mocking and demoralizing and name calling and shouting at patients, and so it was very, very hard in terms of that. So I didn't enjoy my obstetrics, actually. It was one of my worst rotations, but it was not in my heart. It was where I needed to be. So as soon as I could, now in South Africa, you have 6 years medical school, 3 years government service. So my government service was 2 years internship and then 1 year community service. And I started doing home birth kind of in between, which wasn't the best, because the babies would kind of start coming when I was on call, and it was not very practical. So I was learning the ropes as I was going, and my enthusiasm was sometimes leading the way. But in community service, at the end, I had my second birth, which was a water birth and a lotus birth, meaning I didn't touch the cord at all. And from there, I completed my comm service, and I was able then to take my private practice into my own hands. But the first thing I did now with my little baby and my older son was to actually shadow with my midwife. So I became her student. I went to her prenatal to relearn how to connect with people. I was running the antenatal clinics before, but this was not the way I wanted to do it, like seeing people every 10, 15 minutes and just going through the medical protocols, which are actually pretty easy. Obstetrics and gynae is quite, it doesn't actually take much, but it doesn't take much brain if you just follow the algorithms. So I kind of wanted to unlearn that and be able to really sit with women in a birth and connect with them and give them the sanctity of the birth that I knew to be true. But I was also carrying a lot of trauma and a lot of trauma from the births I'd seen and the discrepancies and the activism I was feeling and what I knew to be so true. So there was always this constant heart pulling. And so I started with her for about 6 to 9 months, and I'd attend her births, and then from soon after that, actually we came back to India, and that's when I was practicing home births in West Bengal. We're in an international community here. It's very rural, so the nearest hospital was 1 hour away, but it was not. It was an awful hospital, awful. I would not now. I'm back in West Bengal in the same place, and I will do anything not to refer to those hospitals. There's a better 1.5 hours away, which I've been able to have a good relationship with. But before that was not possible. So that was also traumatizing. And but as I went, and as my sons grew up, and I grew up personally out of my pregnancy and post-pregnancy phase, then I grew more into the world of the womb in terms of a menstruating woman, a postpartum woman, a mother. And I kept on coming back to menstruation and the cycle. So my focus broadened, and I was also studying herbs all the way in between. My kind of circle became bigger than just what happens in pregnancy and birth in terms of the womb, really. And I started seeing the womb as a lens for a woman's health. And then I started sending red tent circles, went back to South Africa, opened my own practice, which attracted more holistic women's healing, so more women not only pregnant, even though I always carried on home birth. I have never had an extremely busy, like more than 3. I tried to always have 1 birth a month, but maybe at the most 3. But I wasn't, extremely busy having more than 1 a month on average through the year. So I paced myself mostly because my children, the other kind of real tug for me was having the balance between my own personal connection with my children and following my passion. So, and the time for work and that. But as my lens kind of started opening to seeing women's health through the womb, I'd attend red tent circles and really go deeper into that. And then there comes kind of a point where you have to, I don't know if it's like this for all health practitioners, but it was it's a constant point for me, where you're having to, what's right, you're teaching what's right, you're sharing what's right, and you're constantly growing this body of knowledge of what will really be awesome for women to not just have their vitals and their functions like normal, like doctor health kind of goes to that extent, but to really feeling the potency of how led and how connected and how tuned in we can be when we just listen to the womb. So I found I had to kind of step back and start applying what I was feeling and thinking and knowing to myself. And that has been maybe the transformational key, was to step into not the patient side, but the receiving side for myself, and to take the time for that, realizing that things weren't coming out into the world if it was not coming from me in a whole place. And so that's been maybe like the hardest part, is to do the journey yourself, but the most rewarding part. So the lens kind of opened, and at an amazing retreat 2 years ago with other women who are teaching around health, kind of connections were made and things solidified, and it really rested, if I had to say upon anything, upon me feeling seen. So I've had these thoughts and these ideas, and I'd never felt very part of anything with it because I was a doctor midwife. So I didn't ever really fit into the midwifing definition, and I'm not a midwife, so I couldn't say that. And obviously I didn't fit into the doctor definition because I didn't agree with many things and the approaches. So that was, so I always maybe felt I had to hide and protect myself, and the retreat really helped me to be seen and validated, and that what I was thinking and feeling was right and I should go with it. So this whole download started happening as I started working with my own womb, and that's a whole nother story that led me into the beautiful healing spaces physically and still does. But it helped me to kind of see that womb wisdom as medicine, not just as a phrase and not just as a nice, like, sit in the park and meditate on your womb, but really taking it seriously. And I started seeing the lens of life, but also my medical career and my work and birth and pregnancy through the lens of the womb. And that became very clear for me. And then the clarity came into really knowing that we need to reframe women's healthcare because it's not serving women. So one, we know that when a woman tunes into her womb, and that I'm not going to go into all those details now, I want to try and keep it specifically around pregnancy and birth. When a woman tunes into her womb, the clarity and the healing and the guidance is phenomenal, but it also pushes you into more of your right to, now it starts sounding a bit corny, but your right to thrive, your right to shine or shine. But that's kind of where it came to me, was that when you are following that and when you're following what's true to you, your health takes on its own course. And I could start to see symptoms and as messages more. And this also became a very, not just like a, hey, read a Louise Hay book and like, that's it. But really feeling into it and really being able to follow that. So for me to kind of, I don't have fancy kind of latest technology tools to share and enlighten people with, because I keep on going back to the basics of the wisdom of a woman's body. And when we just really work around supporting those basics, I think they work phenomenally. And that doesn't mean that we never have to see a doctor and we never need a biopsy and we never need a hysterectomy or something, you know, cancer screening or an intervention or a cesarean. It means that when you're doing it with such integrity and knowing that there is no feeling of disempowerment. It is in the same journey. So that started, you know, really fleshing out for me and becoming real in practicality. And in terms of pregnancy and birth and postpartum, the downloads really started affirming everything that I'd read in the prenatal psychology route. That and then, you know, as a parent also, and the parent even of teenage child and continuously of myself and working in our relationship, it keeps coming down to connection so deeply. And when this lockdown started, actually, I made a video about the dangers of the disconnection and isolation and how it's going to trigger people's traumas and anxieties and abandonment issues and all these things. That was in March last year. So I've written an article also. What I started becoming very clear to me is that women are going to start rising, because the interventions and the way the interventions are rolled out is women are coming out of the experiences, or sometimes having insight before the experience to avoid it, that the hurt and the harm of modern obstetrics, really, with over intervention and not listening to women, is going to hit women in too much of a sore place to ignore. And women are going to start rising from that. And that's what I really think we've seen in the last few years. And sometimes I'm not sure of my perspective, because everything on my social media revolves around this. But I'm pretty sure that there is an international rise in unassisted birth, and in women rising around birth and taking on their own choices and taking responsibility for their own choices, and just really pushing that deeper and rejecting the obstetrics model of care for a physiological birth for low risk mother. And even, high risk can be a whole discussion. It doesn't mean you don't have to have nice care, like, you know what I mean, connecting personal, respectful care. So I could see that this was before Corona and everything. So I was really feeling that the peak of obstetrics was falling, and with it was coming a lot of fighting egos in South Africa. A lot of obstetricians stopped delivering babies because the insurance was so high. So there would only be gynecologists. They would not see women past 12 or 20 weeks, if at all, pregnant, because of the indemnity costs. So we could see this all crumbling. Where I'm from in South Africa, originally in Cape Town, there's one independent midwife left who has a gynae supporting her. There is no independent gynae supporting midwifery care for backup for home births in Cape Town, South Africa. So you could see this falling in many ways, but I felt most of it would come in a different sense of women rising and calling it out. And I think that is what we can see now. And I thought that this obstetrics would be the kind of the pinnacle fall of Western medicine. So I realized that this was where we needed to create the discussions and the care. But what also happened is that I became exhausted, really, with the reach outs and with the kind of the mass, not conversion, but the external energy always going out, trying to convert, trying to explain, and all of these things. So I realized the change starts with me, and that might be the most powerful thing. So instead of wanting to change, of course I want to change the world and reach out and all of that, but I realized that I personally need my circle to be where I can manage. And so I brought it down and down and down to me, basically what I offer with every woman that I come in touch with to birth. That was where my attention went. Instead of wanting to change the world, I realized, okay, well, let me be the change that I want to see. And then along with the womb work and the red tent work, that obviously became more and more of a personal journey, but about expanding this work. And whatever I've kind of done, I've always come back to births. So it follows me a bit, and whether I like it or not. That's kind of my introduction to me and my work. If you want to ask any questions now, Kathy, or if I should just go into more about what I was feeling around that.
Yeah, I would say I love the introduction. It's just given us such great insight as well. Sorry, pushing wrong buttons. Yeah, so I would say absolutely please carry on now into that area. I love what you're explaining with the uprising of women, and it's pretty devastating to hear a statistic along the lines that there's not, there is no access to obstetric care for women who are home birthing in Cape Town. Like, this is nuts. That we've got to this point, which is obviously, very complicated, and perhaps one of the issues has been that is that midwifery is so attuned to looking after normal, which means that midwives can pick up when things are not normal and when obstetric care is absolutely appropriate. But it's that difficulty of having obstetric medicine who really their specialization is abnormal, is complications and complexities of care, and having that system take over the health and birth of a normal physiological birth. So it's that sort of crossover, isn't it, of people getting into the wrong, we're intervening in stuff that doesn't need to be intervened with. But so look, please carry on. I love your introduction, and I'm not sure that you made it super clear that it is 2:30 in the morning. Well, it's probably about 3 o'clock now in India, and Gauri is on the roof. And I was like, why is it so quiet? I'm thinking I can't hear any traffic, but that's because it is 3 o'clock in the morning. So please carry on now into your topics to do with the framing, and you're doing a wonderful job. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's 2:30 here. Maybe you can hear the insect, but it's quite interesting on the roof. Okay, so so as I was preparing for this, I was just writing down some thoughts, and just to, I'm just using my torch here to see. Yeah, so it came very much around knowing the depth of connection and how important this is for our healing and for, what happens at birth, and in terms of the intrinsic primal need of a person to connect. And so I wrote something that's something like the crevice. You see that it's almost like they know. It's almost like they know that the most deepest, rawest place to break a person would be to disconnect the maternal baby bond. Well, they're doing it from before birth. And in that crevice of connection, it's like they can imprint our traumas and our hurts, which make us, which control us in our life for so much longer. And it's like they are, let me see if I can read my writing here. So I can see that the insidious and promiscuous snake that slithers along your pregnancy, whispering doubts and fears into your ears while you sleep, is the precipitous of our trauma body. And sorry, but modern medicine is creating this more and more. And it's from there that the woman will start, will not start, but that the doubt creeps in, and the doubt in trusting our bodies, and basically breaking us down more and more. And in the separation of birth, at birth, is so harmful and so disruptive in such a deep way in terms of a woman, in terms of a baby's progression. And I started realizing that the most important, I just lost my track. okay, I'm going to go back to what interrupted my track, was that during pregnancy, I've said 3 things are most important. And the one is nutrition. And I haven't been able to find better 3 things than these 3 things. So I stick to these 3 things. The one for a pregnant mother, the one is nutrition. So making sure you eat well and healthy and regular and the right kind of foods and avoid other foods. That's kind of basic. And the second one is connecting with your baby. So really taking the time to connect with your baby inside, just as much as you would use a blood pressure reading to check, that the physical health is fine. I think we need to be teaching our women, and women are doing it naturally, but to bring it more into a conscious thing as well, to connect with your baby in your womb as a guide and as a barometer. And I really, really feel that if a woman is doing this, she'll be guided to know when something is not right, when something needs to be followed up, and to use that as a compass and a barometer. So in this way, you're building the connection between your baby and yourself, and you're also growing your trust in your own body. And it doesn't mean that, you just go through an unassisted birth, this unassisted pregnancy. It means that you are connecting with your body and following, and your womb and your baby, and you're following the messages and the prompts from that. And then the third thing is to feel good with your healthcare practitioner. And the way I would kind of measure that or explain that is that when you come out of a consultation with them, you feel empowered, heard, and positive. Because too often we hear the opposite of women not feeling heard in the gynae care, not feeling empowered in their choices, and not feeling very positive. So I use those 3 kind of criteria for it, and then those 3 practices. What I also did after, when I was busy shadowing my midwife, was I did a Sula course, and a Sula course was a 3-week intensive connecting with your baby in your womb. So it was a process that you'd go through in visualization and meditation. And, throughout I'm thinking, what can I do to better my work, my service? After your ComServe, everyone wants to do a diploma, and the diploma of obstetrics and gynae was very attractive. And I, was pulled to it many times, and also just to specialize in gynae. But I realized that this was not in alignment with my practice and my approach. So instead, I did this 3-week intensive Sula training, which was being able to work to teach moms and go through a practice of connecting them very deeply with their baby in the womb through a meditation and a visualization. And so that was kind of what I added to my toolbox. And yeah, so what I started feeling into about the importance of the connection, and then seeing it more and more break down, not only in the physical nature of birth, but also in what it meant for women to connect with their babies. And I started realizing that the postpartum time, the postpartum time started impressing me more and more that this was the most important time for everyone, unless so Sula is SOULA, Sula training, and it's done by a lady in South Africa, Robin Sheldon, with Mama Bamba, and Sula so it's like doula with an S, so soul doula, Sula. The postpartum time. So I realized that this is the most important time for everyone, unless you basically are adopted at birth. So that, and this was the most important time for everyone, because every baby goes through a mother's postpartum or their own postpartum with their mother. So caring for a mother in her postpartum, for me, became a focus as well. So the pregnancy and the birth was kind of more of my practice, and I'm doing that, and I'm always speaking about it, and I have birth circles, and I'm always speaking and encouraging more and more people about it and writing about it. But I focused on my practice with my one-to-ones with my mums. And then the postnatal care was really where I started being able to see my lens of reframing women's healthcare through postpartum care. And I think, if you're here and if you're listening to this, we're all in agreement that the postnatal care and time is not only about, of course, the baby's being born and coming into his earth body and getting used to that in the baby's fourth trimester, but it's the mother's gets reborn as a mother herself. And if we really have to give time and effort to consider what is happening in those first few weeks postpartum, when her body physically is settling into a new breastfeeding, different blood volume and circulation and body, but it's also the deeper sides of what it means to have become mother is also kind of taking a re-energetic patterning. And for that, I find the pause and the rest and the lying next to baby, yes, all the bonding and all the breastfeeding, and Niels Bergman is our hero there with Skin to Skin, and he's also from where I am from in South Africa. But also just energetically, really understanding that the woman needs the space for her to become mother. And when you're given that space with the same tools of connecting deeply and giving the rest and the time to allow that and following your connection with your baby, the trust comes. And I think that's one of the awful effects of the obstetric. I mean, I'm not going anti obstetrics. I have very good friends who are obstetricians and who I work very well with. And so it's not anti obstetrics, it's anti the unconscious, disrespectful, unnatural to interventionist approach. I think in a mature way we can talk about that. So I realized, yeah, Gauri is a medical intervention specialist, and I am a natural birth specialist, and I started owning that more and kind of coming out of the terminology of birth keeper, because that term started to be used more and more, and I felt that it didn't include my credentials in a sense. And so maybe through my womb work also I was able to claim a bit more of my offering as a natural birth specialist, as opposed to an obstetrician, which is an interventionist birth specialist, which they are. So the part which is most appalling really about it is that it breaks a phenomenal portal of knowledge and growth and everything for a woman, which is really her trust in her own self and in her own body. And when you nurture that postpartum, a woman it feeds her whole confidence as becoming a mother, as becoming in tune with baby's needs, as becoming in tune in her needs, and being able to follow what is needed there in a mature way. So it was really about that sense of trust that gets taken away in a sense with the obstetric model and then also postpartum model. So a lot of it for me is not what we can add, and there's an amazing tool, or there's an amazing exercise, and I'm very keen to learn all of those, but that's not what I inherently bring. So I bring something far less glamorous in a sense, and far more simple, because it's there. And I'm reminding us that it's there, and I'm kind of nudging us back into tune with our own alignment in our own body, simply because my years have taught me that there's nothing, or that we can learn so much from a woman's body, and the trust has come there, not from anything else except watching a woman's body work so well in pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. So that's what built my trust more and more. That you want to say something, Kathy?
No, you carry on.
Sorry. Okay. that this was where the information lay also, was following that guidance of trust. So the reframing part, just to get more practical, because I bring it into, I'm starting to write courses now because I realize that's a great way to connect with people and to connect with very like-minded people, so we can build that force more and more. I don't like wasting my time so much in converting people. I've done a lot of preaching in many ways in my life, and I find it's a lot of energy for a little bit. So I rather spin my yarn really where it's going to be heard, and I don't need to get into passionate arguments and things. And I appreciate that when I also connect with gynaes, that you can talk in this mature way. We are all on the same path in one sense of actually really wanting what's best for mother and baby. So the lens of postpartum, and I just want to give you some practical things that we could bring into the practice. And a lot of the practical things for me became practicing what I was preaching. So if I would say to a mom, connect with your womb and really follow that guidance, I realized, okay, I have to spend some time in my day connecting with my womb and following my guidance. And sometimes that's the hardest part, because it's humbling. It makes you insignificant in some ways, but it also makes you more significant, in part of the greater scheme of the journey and of the womb. But I realized I had to start taking my own medicine like that. And that's what also slows me down in one sense, because I can't always be on social media or whatever, putting my message out there. I have to be taking it in as well. And so, and it sounds quite obvious, but if you just cut up the day and you cut up, your time with your family and what's important for you, and I'm getting enough sleep and all these things, there has to be some time where you are putting into actually doing what you are saying people should do. And that's the hardest lesson, and that's not fancy. So I'm just looking at my notes there, because just coming back to what's happening around motherhood, I think I might also just be presuming that people are already accepting and acknowledging, if they're listening to this, what I'm meaning. But it's the actual imprinting that happens at motherhood, at those first few weeks and before of becoming a mother. It's the imprinting where you get to really have that sense of trust and connection with yourself and with what matters to you, and aligning yourself with what is true to you, as opposed to the imprinting of not knowing what's going on and always handing it over to an external source. So if baby's not breastfeeding, or the latch is not there, or what, instead of kind of going to the doctor and finding out what you can do, but bringing it back to the basics, have the 40 days of rest being followed, like to the T. So I overemphasize this, and I know that the clients will maybe follow a little bit of it, more or less, but most follow a little bit of it, and I keep bringing them back to that, because there's no point adding on egg-linol or adding on whatever you're using to even, fenugreek seeds to improve the breast milk and breastfeeding like that, if we're not taking the time to lie next to our baby only for 40 days. And that's harsh, because women will feel restless and they'll want to get up. But I say it like that because if we just get 2 weeks of that, it's gold. And so, so that kind of brings it into the imprinting of what's happening in a mother's body. And then the energies can kind of, they can settle inside. So we're very programmed to find an external reason or somebody outside to help us. And I keep bringing it back to us inside. And I find that we can't jump onto step 4, 5, and 6 until we've done step 1, 2, and 3. So it's bringing us. So then I realized, oh well, I'm doing this. I'm following the natural physiology of the woman. This is what it means. So I keep embodying that more and more, but it doesn't cost money. Well, I mean, it might cost money to get your support and what you need to be able to do that, but intrinsically, the village would be there. So it doesn't, I mean, you don't have to have the fancy nursery, you don't have to have the fancy monitor, you don't have to have the fancy pump or the fancy gynae and all of that. It has to come back to ourselves in all the times. And that includes support. It doesn't mean we only do it alone, but it's bringing us back to the basics of that. So I keep coming back to that instead of putting our, oh, something's wrong, let me ask out there. You ask out there, but through the filter of yourself or of what you know and need, and you focus on building that. So if you're not lying next to baby and baby's not within like 50 centimeters of you to smell and feel and hear you, I'm not surprised when that the problems start, kind of thing. So we need to bring it back to that to avoid the problems and to treat the problems. So yeah, so that's one thing. So I'm not one of those doctors, you know, you come out of you can imagine, come out of my a consultation room with an injection and with like a packet full of pills to solve your problem. I don't do the quick fix because I don't think it serves us. But I add it on. I don't like make people suffer either, I hope. So there's always just a context, you know, and if there's a context of themselves. And so in reframing, just to get also a bit practical, in reframing and writing my postpartum care course for mothers and for practitioners to learn, I had to bring it back and back and back. And I had to basically, if we talk about reframing women's healthcare, we have to reframe our own understanding of our own body and our own physiology. So it came back to kind of, I broke it up into parts of our body, reframing yoni, our connection with our yoni, what is our yoni, our vagina, what is our womb, what is our connection with our womb, and then going into the imprinting that we have already received in our own life, or that, you know, what everyone has a story, going back into redefining breast, reframing breasts, reframing breast as sacred, yoni as sacred. And so reframing what is meant by that, what is our connection to that. It's reframing the anatomy in terms of its physiology and using words that are empowering and constructive instead of minimizing, learning that a woman's cycle is her compass, and that to really sink into that is a whole nother topic, but to really sink into that in the wisdom of our womb, and by acknowledging that and sinking into that, it supports our healing and it supports our attitude to our womb, which is receptive to that attitude. So and then that's the inner work also. So you can't just like have a course, or I thought, or an advice or something, presuming that every woman is thinking about her yoni or her womb in the same way. Because if we are taking the imprinting from social media and from our, you know, the trajectory of it's dirty, the shame, the guilt, all of these things, instead of realizing that it's a phenomenal portal of creation, whether it's a baby or an idea or a dream, then the languages are not going to mix. So the reframing had to come back to these kind of basics, where we go into the physiology and anatomy, physically, physiological, but I mean like anatomically, physiologically, biologically, but also energetically and in a sacred framework. And then from there, you could build on to understanding why the practices are what they are, and why doing a yoni steam after a birth is not just about getting the physical aspects of circulation and the herbs into the yoni, but it's actually also about taking the time to deeply connect. And an interesting thing that happened is I made a product called Yoni Balm, and I started sharing and having workshops about how to make it, so to teach more people to make it, because I'm at that kind of empowering route. And the workshop was filled with perimenopausal women mostly, and the feedback was amazing. The intention of my yoni balm had primarily been for postpartum. But the feedback that I was getting was not only about the physical aspects in the balm, it was about taking that tiny little bit of time and acknowledgement for a woman to connect with her yoni. And that's when things open up and wisdoms come in and healing comes in. Whether it's as physical as, I didn't notice I had this polyp, but now I can feel something there, and let me go to a gynae to check it out, or to just the connecting, opening other pathways. So this is where my work has kind of always come back to those basics.
Oh, it's just been so wonderful listening to you, Gauri. There's so much resonance on what you're saying, that's for sure. We've got a couple of questions that are just come in here and that we haven't covered off. So one of them is somebody was asking if you are familiar with the Gulabi gang, also known as the Pink Sari gang. This person was wondering if you work with them.
I'm not, but I will look that up.
Ah, interesting.
Yes,
well, India is a big place.
Indian. Yeah.
And another one that we've got here is what are practical steps to how to connect with your womb on a daily basis? I would have to just sort of add in here, I'm not sure that's how many people watching this are familiar, but myself and a Australian OB/GYN and some other health professionals voluntarily run a site called Ask the Maternity Gurus on Facebook, where basically women who are primarily in countries where it's really tricky for them to receive what they feel is good advice on things, that we're not trying to diagnose over the internet. You know, it's a tricky balance between giving something that's good concrete advice and really stepping outside the area where it's not possible to give advice when you can't see somebody in person. But it is striking how many women come into their pregnancies at the very beginning of their pregnancy with clearly an enormous disconnect with their body and an enormous lack of trust in their body. And I think we have so much culture around preventing pregnancy that, you know, I mean, that sort of thing is taught through school, and, you know, being aware of contraception and preventing STIs and all that sort of thing. We get all of that, and that's all really important. But what is missing is that when the women do go into that place of being ready to fall pregnant, or accidentally falling pregnant, because of course 50% of pregnancies generally are unplanned, so there's just so little preparation before it, and of having any kind of level of appreciation for your own sacredness. And, you know, just like that journey you went through with your first pregnancy, and I went through with my first pregnancy at birth and postpartum, is that you kind of learn that through that time. You think, oh my God, this is so important. And isn't it a shame that we don't speak of this through, I guess, puberty would be the time to be talking about it, and putting girls already in touch with their, you know, their feminine goddess at that stage. But sorry, I was having my own little chat there. But going back to that question, what are the things that you particularly would be recommending for women in early pregnancy? I guess apart from, you know, meditation is a really great thing. What are some other things that you would be recommending how women get in touch with that, a barometer of their womb?
it's simply to connect with their womb. So simply taking the time to slow down, and in meditation put our hands on our womb and start the connection, whether you're breathing into your womb and following some womb meditation, or actually just saying hi. It feels a bit awkward at first, but hi womb, I'm going to focus on connecting with you, and then listening and connecting, and messages will come up, stories will come up, nudges, information will come up, and to follow it. Because I think that's the hard part also, is we don't take it seriously, because it doesn't come in an email or something. But so it takes practice of, oh gosh, that memory has come up again, or every time I do that, I keep thinking about this, and actually following it through. So
yeah,
really
you're absolutely right. And that following your gut instinct. And it's funny because so often as we grow up as humans these days, particularly in the Western world, there's just no respect paid to gut instinct or intuition, or it's not even something that's discussed. And certainly I know that with raising our children, it was something that I would always kind of embed in the conversation every day, where it's like, oh, I'm not sure if I should try out for that team or something, and you go, well, what's your gut instinct telling you? It's like getting them to just realize that this is something reliable. But the funny thing is that after you have a baby, people talk about it all the time. Oh, well, what's your mother's intuition saying? And you're thinking, well, no, I'd never relied on that before, and now suddenly I have to rely on it. And it's always been there. And there's some other queries that have come in. Could we hear more around the 40 days? And oh, look, I just loved it when you mentioned that, the 40 days, because it's something that I have preached to my own caseload of women for decades. That 40 days and 40 nights, I want you to stay home and not go anywhere or do anything, and just be with your baby. And that's and there is this almost feeling, particularly in the West, I feel that that if women are not up, dressed, makeup on, doing some exercise, taking their Facebook for selfies, showing the world that everything's going brilliantly well, in that first couple of weeks, they're feeling like they're not keeping up, and they're kind of failing. And I would say, look, I don't even want you to get out of your pajamas for 40 weeks, actually. I mean, for 40 days, actually. And those that would do that, they get such a better experience.
So is the questions around what is the benefits or how it helps the mum? So
40 days resting, that restoration, how does it help the mum to restore it in her role as a mother? Was really how she embraces the role, that new role.
So I think one is just that, and also just in terms of connecting with your womb is in a meditation is such a simple thing, but our brains are not getting a pause right now. There's always social media, there's always something happening, and we don't know what's our own thoughts and what is coming from other media. And then also the energetics right now in the world are so large and dominating that you actually need that time to just come into a resonance of yourself and actually just become clear and aligned with yourself, and to keep coming back to that alignment. And if we're not in that alignment, which we get for me, maybe other women and people can do it in different ways, but for me it has been from my womb. And I mean, it sounds a bit silly, but that's where it has been for me, because it's an organ, it sounds a bit silly. But so when you're in that alignment, you know what to do. You're not basing your steps and your life really on what all the other information you're getting, but you are judging it, what is true for me, what feels in alignment. And the thing is, if you're not, you're going to get symptoms and nudges and messages that want to bring you back in alignment. Your body wants to be in alignment. Your body doesn't want to feel and know something so strongly and not be acting in what that way should be in your life. So if you're not in alignment, it's going to put you in alignment. So if you are having heavy periods or painful periods or symptoms during your pregnancy, I really feel that our bodies are our deepest well-wishers, and they're telling us things.
Yes.
So
yeah.
okay,
Absolutely right.
And if you're pregnant,
the body's trying to get that homeostatic equilibrium all the time. That's its total mission, isn't it? It's constantly trying to do that. And we, the messages do come through, and it's about hearing them. We are running out of time.
I haven't answered all your questions, but
no, I know. We're just going to skip through some of these. And so there was a question there about genital trauma relating to potty training, early molesting, teaching children to reduce trauma effects. I'm sorry, that question from Walter, we won't have time to get into it. That's a very deep, lengthy topic itself, and plus the focus on this particular group of webinars that we do is really specifically around that maternity journey. There was a question there about resource for finding the recipe for your balm and yoni steaming. Now, one of the things that is going to happen for those who are registered for this webinar is that within 24 hours from now, you will be receiving an automated message from Zoom, which and we're going to include in that some information about how to connect with Gauri, and maybe we can get that included, Gauri, into the message about how people can find out a little bit more about your balm. And another question here from Heidi, where does the partner fit into this whole picture? Well, that's again another huge topic, and obviously the partners are really critically important to all of this, though of course not all women have partners. So another big topic, and it's not that it's certainly not that they're not of importance at all. It's just that that's not what we were talking about here today. So a little message here. Thank you, Mum is reborn. And yes, thank you. A mum is reborn, and her 3 different jobs to care for the mum. She volunteers and helps mums to heal, postpartum doula, mother of new mums. It's lovely to hear from you all, and but we are running out of time. But as I say, now for those, last thing before we wind up, for those people, men and women, who are watching this webinar but did not register for it in the original version. So these could be people who are watching it further and later down the track who won't be receiving the automated email. Gauri, could you also just include now your contact information, or how people would be able to touch base with you?
Okay, I also just want to acknowledge the importance of a partner and including the partner. And right now, as things go, you create as you go. And I'm working with a couple in South Africa to create online antenatal care, and the partner is very much involved and interested. So now we are creating that as a construct. So just to acknowledge.
Yeah, we're certainly not. Yeah, we're not overriding them today. It was just not the topic we were on. We've got, yes.
Yeah, and yeah. So
okay, so do let us know. Yeah, the contact details.
So my contact details are my website is drgaurilowe.com. Dr. DrGauriLowe. So it's my name, and I'm the same on Facebook and Instagram, but it's also under the heading I Am Sacred Woman, because I am sacred woman. And if I can own it, I can say it to you.
Yeah.
So that's my contact details. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well,
Thank
thank
you.
you so much, everybody, for being here live today, and a huge thank you to Gauri, because it's a hideous time to be up in the night and doing a webinar. Although those of us involved with being on call certainly know it's like. I've actually been doing some driving recently in the middle of the night, just because it was easier to get between towns in the middle of the night. And you just go, there's this whole world out there, isn't there, that reminds you that it's a really lovely time to actually be awake. And so many babies are born at around 3 o'clock in the morning. It's just a really popular time with babies. 3, 4, 5, and 6. That's their favorite times. But thank you, everybody, for being here. And thank you, Gauri. Is there anything final you'd like to add before we wind up?
No, I've got, lots and lots more I'd love to add. And I thank you for the interesting questions and the attention. That's been, wonderful. And thank you, Kathy, for your initiative and for allowing me the opportunity. Yeah.
Oh, it's our honor to have you here. And so thank you, everybody. And we wish you all a wonderful rest of your day and rest of your week. And I hope to see you at the next webinar. Bye, everybody.
Great.
Thank you, Gauri.
Thank you.